This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for October 14th, 5 p.m. Here's the HurTrack program showing the current position of Tropical Storm Paula. It's almost directly over the city of Havana, Cuba at this hour, moving slowly off to the east. Let's go ahead and put it in motion and show you what's going to happen now tonight. It'll be directly over the city of Havana, Cuba. By the way, our current feature is Havana, Cuba at Hurricane City. Click on the name Havana, Cuba next to the map, tracking map, or simply click over Havana, Cuba on the tracking map, and it'll take you to the page with the local radars and cams. There's an interesting cam shot. I'll show you that in just a minute. Anyway, the system moves off due east in advance of a cold front, and then by tomorrow evening, this re-emerges back over the water in the Florida Straits and heads in the general direction of the Bahamas. That's the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Now, the hurricane hunters have been flying around out there, and they're, believe it or not, flying right over the airspace of Cuba. And I want to show you this image real quickly here. These are vortex message fixes from the center of circulation from the hurricane hunters. Yesterday we had the system in the Yucatan Channel over here. We had 991 millibars and a closed eye wall, winds gusting to about 70 miles an hour. Then it began its right-hand turn, and it meandered right off the coast of Cuba and went up to around 1,007 millibars. Now it's back down to around 1,003 millibars, which is pretty standard for a weakening tropical storm. There are going to be fluctuations in pressure, but there is a drop zone right on land. And you know, I've talked to Alexi and Avila down at the Hurricane Center about the hurricane hunters being able to fly down in Cuban airspace. They do get special permission to fly the C-130s into the hurricanes when they're near the Cuban airspace. So even though tensions, political relations aren't the best with Cuba, they still do allow us to fly our recon missions down there into hurricanes, which is comforting to know, especially when you have a major situation in the future that may come up, that we're able to fly into these systems without any problems. Now here's the way they do that. Here is the C-130 aircraft, and let me unzoom that. And this plane flies into the hurricane and drops a drop zone that looks like this. And they slide the drop zone, which is right here, into this tube, and then they close the tube down and hit a button, and this releases this capsule into the ocean. It flies down with a little parachute attached to it, and this system, this thing here is probably about 2-3 feet long and a real lightweight item with all kinds of instruments in there. And even when it hits the water, it still measures the sea surface pressures and temperatures down at on the surface of the ocean. So it's a real good tool to use to figure out how strong a system is. All right, here are the models on our system, and again, pretty tightly clustered through the Yucatan, through the Florida Straits here and into the Bahamas. Kind of doing a little bit of a loop-to-loop. The National Hurricane Center forecast still calls for this to eventually make its way back down into the Caribbean, but the rest of the models are pretty much shooting it through the Bahamas, but it'll be a very weak system, probably tropical depression status at that time. Now here's that webcam I was telling you about in the drop-down menu at Hurricane City. This is from Havana, Cuba. This is right from the heart of the city, and you can see partly cloudy skies. It looks like the sun is out, so it's really not that big of a deal, but they are expecting quite a bit of rain down there, up to 6 inches in some cases, due to the fact that this system is moving slowly. But you can see the road looks like it's dry. This was just from a little while ago, so things are looking good down there, Havana, Cuba at this hour. Just some puffy black clouds, but not a lot of heavy rain at this moment. Here's the western tip of Cuba, and I'm showing you this map because there's been a lot of reference to high terrain and mountainous terrain that weakens systems, which is true when you have a system crossing over land, but this came from over water and is now on land. But these mountains are not all that high, about 2,500 feet in western Cuba. The higher mountains are in eastern Cuba and central Cuba, but when you get in over here in west Cuba, these mountains aren't that high. In fact, they're more or less hills than they are mountains. But the National Hurricane Center did report a 68-mile-per-hour wind near Puerto Esperanza, which is right here, due north of Pinar del Rio, the city of Pinar del Rio, right on the coast here. This is where Puerto Esperanza is, and they reported 68-mile-an-hour winds right there. And our center is right in over here somewhere right now. So they did get some tropical storm force sustained winds up there. So we do definitely have a tropical storm on our hands. All right, look at this steering flow. Well, this isn't the steering flow. This is the wind shear analysis from the University of Wisconsin. But you can see that there's a high pressure set up right here in the Caribbean Sea, and the flow around that is like this, and that's basically a choo-choo train. So anything that gets developing down in the Western Caribbean is going to be brought to the north. It's the same thing as the steering flow, is what the wind shear is showing right now. And we still continue to have 50 to 60 knots of shear up in here, but that may abate over the coming days, and I'll show you an animation in just a minute of the National Weather Service wave height forecast and what's going to happen with the winds and the potential for another system to develop out here. This is very, very interesting. That's going to come up here in the next week or so. But this system is going to move through like this, follow this high pressure ridge, so that's why the indications are this is going to shoot through the Bahamas, but it should be a very weak sheared system at that time. Talking about Paula. Okay, here's the maps on Paula. This is the tropical storm warning, the area in blue, and the cone of error showing this potentially heading back down into the Caribbean Sea. And here's a visible shot. Our center of circulation is right here over land, and all this convection goes pretty far up north here, so there's going to be some rain moving into South Florida within the next 24 hours, and then by Friday afternoon things should clear out in South Florida. But right now we're just getting some light wind, some light rain right now in South Florida. In fact, let's take a look at the radar, long-range radar, using the Hurricane City National Weather Service radar, and you can see that the center is right near Havana, Cuba. Look at all the rain heading towards the Florida Keys and coming into South Florida. It's raining in Miami right now, a little bit of sprinkles up near Fort Lauderdale. Alright, this is an animation of the wave heights from the Marine Modeling and Analysis branch from the National Weather Service, and I want you to focus on the last frames coming up here. Now this is going well into late next week, and you can see the wind barbs change direction here to northeast over the state of Florida, and then we have a new system that brews down here in the Caribbean Sea and heads due north and right west of Jamaica, heading due north, and continues moving north towards Cuba. And this is interesting to note because it looks like this has the potential to be a hurricane here based on this animation, but notice what's even more important is the winds out of the northeast up in here, and all through here, northeast winds, and even easterly winds in the northern Gulf. And what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that there's no cold fronts that are coming down, and because the winds would be shifting out of the west at that point if there was a concern with recurving this out into the open Atlantic. But due to the fact that there is no cold front coming down, according to this wave height map, indicates that this may potentially affect the state of Florida. We're going to have to keep a close eye on this late next week going into next weekend. We could have ourselves a hurricane down in the Caribbean to be concerned about the state of Florida. We'll have to see what happens with the cold fronts. But right now the early indications are, and again, models aren't that good going out about 10 to 12 days, but early indications are there's not going to be any strong cold fronts coming down. So this will be an interesting thing to watch unfold over the coming days. And finally, let's take a look at our water vapor loop of the Caribbean Sea in the southwestern Atlantic Basin, and you can see Tropical Storm Paula still have some magenta colors up here, so pretty strong cloud tops on this as it's going to shoot through the Bahamas more than likely. Give South Florida a little bit of windy, breezy weather and some rain. But here comes the cold front, and look at the dry air line right here, and that's going to come down through the state of Florida and really kick this thing on off to the east, and that's going to happen starting tonight and going into tomorrow. So this is going to probably split the uprights between Cuba and the Florida Keys once it bounces off Havana here and gets back out over the water and head towards Andros Island and east. And again, the National Hurricane Center indicates it could dip back to the south. We'll keep an eye on that. But anyway, our eyes are going to be focusing down here near the Pacific side. We're going to look for genesis of a new system down here in the middle of next week, and that could travel north according to the GFS, so we'll keep an eye on that. That's it for now. We'll be back with another update in a day or two. There's not a whole lot to talk about with Paul. It's going to basically dissipate over the next 24 hours. Might have an update maybe on Saturday or Sunday. We'll see what's going on in the tropics. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.